The quiet man in seat 1/8 cabin lights dimmed gently as passengers filed into the aircraft. The air smelled faintly of lemon disinfectant and recycled air. A baby cried somewhere near the back. While the first-class cabin remained mostly quiet, only a few people were already seated. Among them sat a man dressed in simple black jeans, a plain white shirt, and a soft black jacket. He wore no expensive watch, no jewelry. His hair, slightly messy, fell near his shoulders. His beard, a little untrimmed, gave him a quiet, thoughtful look. It was Keanu Reeves. He sat in seat 1A, next to the window, quietly reading a worn-out book. He didn't use his phone. He didn't fidget or complain about the boarding delay. The crew had smiled politely when they saw him, but none had made a fuss. That's exactly how Keanu liked it. He wasn't flying for a movie shoot or to attend an award show. He was flying for something much deeper, something personal. What no one on that flight knew, yet what even the pilot didn't know, was that Keanu wasn't just a Hollywood actor. Not today, not on this flight. Today, he was wearing a different hat. The flight from Los Angeles to New York was packed. Many people in business suits, others dressed casually, tapping on laptops or checking their phones. Most were too distracted to even glance at the man in 1A. But one man noticed, and not in a good way. A middle-aged man with a thick neck and a crew cut marched into the cabin wearing a dark blue uniform. He wasn't part of the airline staff. He was airport security, and his presence was not subtle. He walked straight into first class and stood near the curtain, scanning the faces. His eyes landed on Keanu. His expression changed. "Excuse me, sir," the officer said in a firm voice, standing directly in front of Keanu. "May I see your boarding pass?" Keanu looked up, calm, polite. "Of course," he said softly. He reached into the pocket of his jacket and pulled out the folded ticket. The officer took it without saying thank you. He looked at the name, then back at Keanu. His eyebrows drew together. "This can't be right," he muttered, stepping back and talking into the radio clip to his shoulder. "Stand by. We've got a situation. Passenger in first class might be using someone else's ticket." Passengers in nearby seats turned their heads. The quiet hum of the cabin turned into soft whispers. Keanu remained seated, still calm. His hands rested in his lap. "Is there a problem?" he asked gently. "Yeah," the officer snapped. "This seat is reserved for premium travelers, people who belong here. You don't look like one of them." A sharp silence followed those words. A few people gasped. Someone said, "That's Keanu Reeves," but the officer ignored it. Keanu didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He simply looked the man in the eyes and said, "I assure you, that is my seat, and that is my name on the ticket." The officer smirked. "Sure it is, and I'm the president." He grabbed the armrest. "I'm going to need you to come with me now." A female flight attendant rushed forward. "Officer, is everything all right?" "He doesn't belong in this cabin," the officer said loudly. "He's either mistaken or trying to pull something." The flight attendant frowned and leaned in. "Sir, do you realize who this is?" "I don't care who he looks like," the officer growled. "Rules are rules." Keanu stood slowly. He wasn't angry. He wasn't embarrassed. He simply looked disappointed, not in the officer, but in the situation, in how quickly people jump to conclusions. "If you need to verify my identity," he said, "you're welcome to scan my boarding pass again, or check with the airline representative at the gate. I boarded early because don't try to talk your way out of this," the officer interrupted. "Let's go." Keanu took a deep breath. Then, with a calmness that surprised even the crew, he reached into the front pocket of his bag and pulled out a slim black folder. He handed it to the officer. "I think this might clear things up," Keanu said. The officer opened it, and the color drained from his face. Inside was an official letter. It bore the logo of the airline. It had a signature at the bottom, and above that signature, in bold letters, it read, "Senior Legal Counsel, Special Advisor to Board of Directors." Name next to the title, Keanu Charles Reeves. For a moment, the entire cabin froze. The officer's lips moved, but no words came out. He handed back the folder with trembling fingers. I didn't know." He stammered. I assumed, it's all right." Keanu said kindly. It happens. The crew member stepped forward, her voice firm now. Sir, with all due respect, you're the one who doesn't belong here. Please step out of first class and let us do our job. The officer turned, humiliated. He walked away without another word. Keanu sat back down. He folded the folder, placed it in his bag, and returned to his book. But something had shifted in the cabin. People looked at him differently now, not as a movie star, but as someone deeper, someone who didn't need to shout or flash a badge, someone who let respect speak louder than anger. The woman seated next to him leaned over, her voice low. You handled that beautifully. Keanu looked up and smiled. Thank you. It's not the first time. As the plane prepared for takeoff, many passengers were still whispering, but now it was in admiration. And somewhere near the back, a teenage boy pulled out his phone, opened a note app, and typed, "Lesson of the day, never judge a person by their clothes or by how quiet they are. Sometimes the quietest ones carry the biggest truth." Asterisk the ripple effect in row 3 after the incident with the security officer. The flight finally took off. The engines roared softly as the plane ascended into the clouds, but the energy inside the cabin remained unusually alert. The passengers had witnessed something rare, something both awkward and strangely powerful. Most couldn't stop replaying the moment in their minds. Keanu, on the other hand, acted like nothing had happened. He kept reading, flipping the pages gently, his expression calm and focused. He didn't seek attention. He didn't act like a victim. He just existed in peace. But for others around him, peace was harder to find. Row 3. Seat B, a man in an expensive navy blue suit tapped his fingers nervously against the armrest. His name was Calvin Dorsey. He was a high-level executive in the airline's operations department. He had recognized Keanu the moment he saw him board, not as an actor, but from a boardroom video call to months ago. He remembered the meeting clearly. It had been about major policy reforms and how the airline handled customer relations and in-flight treatment. Keanu had been brought in as a quiet but sharp voice. Most thought he was there for publicity. Calvin thought so too until Keanu had dismantled a half-dozen legal arguments with quiet precision. Now, Calvin felt his stomach twist. He should have intervened earlier. He should have said something when the officer accused Keanu. But he didn't. He sat back in his seat and stared at the screen in front of him. It was playing some generic travel advertisement. He reached for the call button. A flight attendant arrived moments later. Can you please let the man in 1A know that Calvin Dorsey from operations would like to speak with him after takeoff? The attendant nodded and walked away. Calvin wiped his palms on his pants. Meanwhile, in economy class, passengers were talking to, especially one woman sitting in seat 27C. Her name was Martha Willis. She was 62, wore thick glasses, and carried an old brown purse she held tightly on her lap. She'd seen what happened up front when she peeked through the aisle during boarding. She didn't know who Keanu was, but she saw how kind he was, and how the officer had tried to shame him just because he looked too simple. Martha remembered her own son. He used to get judged the same way before he died in a car accident 3 years ago. Tears welled up in her eyes just thinking about it. But this moment made her heart ache differently. Maybe not everyone like her son was gone. A voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached cruising altitude. You are now free to move around the cabin. Thank you. The flight attendant returned to Keanu's seat and leaned down. Mr. Reeves, Calvin Dorsey from our operations division would like a word with you. He's seated in row 3. Keanu looked up. Of course, he said softly. He closed his book, stood, and walked quietly to row 3. Heads turned. Whispers followed. Some passengers pretended not to watch, but they were watching. Everyone was. Calvin stood to greet him. Mr. Reeves, Calvin said, offering his hand. I want to apologize for earlier. Keanu shook his hand. No need, he replied. These things happen. No, they shouldn't, Calvin said. Not like that. Not to anyone, and especially not to you. Keanu tilted his head slightly. Especially not to me, or especially not to anyone. Calvin looked down, embarrassed. You're right, he said. I meant not to anyone. But I failed to speak up. I saw what happened, and I froze. Keanu placed a hand gently on Calvin's shoulder. We all freeze sometimes, he said. What matters is what we do after. Calvin nodded, his voice low. The officer, he wasn't one of ours, but still, we allowed it. We made it easy for assumptions to happen. Keanu sat next to him for a moment. He didn't talk about himself. Instead, he asked, what policies are in place for how security interacts with passengers? Calvin hesitated. We have a set of protocols, but they haven't been updated in years. A lot is left to discretion. Keanu looked thoughtful. Then maybe it's time to rewrite them. Calvin met his eyes. Would you help us? Keanu gave a soft smile. That's why I'm here. The two men sat together in silence for a moment, the plane quietly humming around them. It was an unusual sight, a Hollywood star sitting beside a corporate executive, not for fame, not for business deals, but for human dignity. Then something unexpected happened. The flight attendant returned, looking worried. Sorry to interrupt, she said. We have a small issue. A woman in seat 7C just fainted. Keanu stood instantly. Is she all right? We're not sure. She seems to have low blood sugar. But she was crying before it happened. The medical kit's been brought out. We could use some calm support. Keanu didn't hesitate. He followed the attendant toward the back of the plane. Martha Willis lay slumped slightly to the side, her eyes closed. A fellow passenger had reclined her seat and was fanning her gently. The attendants were checking her pulse and giving her juice. As Keanu reached her, Martha opened her eyes slowly. It's you, she whispered weakly. I'm here, Keanu said gently, kneeling beside her. You're going to be okay. A tear rolled down her cheek. You remind me of my son. Keanu held her hand. What was his name? Samuel, she said. He was kind, quiet like you. Keanu nodded. Samuel sounds like someone special. Martha closed her eyes again, breathing a little easier. A few minutes later, she sat upright, sipping juice, her color returning. The attendant smiled, relieved. But the atmosphere had changed again. Passengers were no longer just watching a celebrity. They were watching a human being. A man who read quietly, responded gently, and helped people without being asked. A man who got wrongly accused, yet never raised his voice. As Keanu walked back to his seat, applause broke out, not loud, but sincere. And for the first time during the flight, Keanu looked a little emotional. But he didn't show it. He sat down, again, opened his book, and began to read where he had left off. In the back of the plane, Martha held her purse close and whispered, Samuel would have liked him. And in the cockpit, the captain quietly radioed the airline base. You might want to update the cabin report. The man in 1A just changed our whole flight. Turbulence and truth at 30,000 feet. Plane had been in the air for nearly 3 hours. Somewhere between the golden deserts of Colorado and the cloudy plains of Kansas. The atmosphere inside the aircraft had shifted. People were quieter, more thoughtful. Strangers had begun offering to help each other with little things, adjusting bags, sharing snacks, checking if the older passengers were comfortable. It all began with a simple mistake, but that mistake had revealed something deeper. Not just about the officer who made the assumption, but about everyone who saw it and chose to either speak or stay silent. And now, everyone was watching Keanu Reeves a little differently. He wasn't just that famous actor in seat 1A. He was the man who remained calm when wrongly accused, who comforted a stranger during a medical scare, who spoke to a high-level executive not with anger, but with clarity and kindness. But the day's lessons were not finished yet. As the cabin crew began preparing for meal service, a slight jolt shook the plane. Passengers barely noticed it at first, the usual light turbulence. A few fastened their seatbelts again, just to be safe. The captain's voice came over the speaker. Calm and professional, ladies and gentlemen, we've encountered a small area of rough air. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We expect smoother skies ahead. But then the next jolt hit harder. Trays rattled. Someone's drink spilled on their lap. A baby cried out. Keanu gently placed his book down and looked out the window. Thick clouds were rising outside, gray and tall, like walls of mist ready to swallow the sky. In economy, Martha gripped her seat armrests, her breathing shallow. "I've always hated flying," she whispered. Back in first class, Calvin Dorsey tensed. The screens flickered for a moment, then returned. The plane shook again, this time. The shaking didn't stop right away. A tense voice came over the speaker. "Again, flight attendants, take your seats, secure the cabin." Keanu looked around. He noticed a young boy in seat to seat clenching his eyes shut and whispering something to himself. The boy's mother was trying to soothe him, but her own hands trembled. "Hey," Keanu said gently, turning slightly in his seat. "What's your name?" The boy looked up, his eyes wide. "Liam," he said softly. "Liam, I'm Keanu." He replied. "Do you like roller coasters?" Liam shook his head quickly. "No, they scare me." Keanu smiled. "Me too sometimes. But you know what? When the plane shakes like this, it's like the sky's roller coaster. And the pilots, they've done this 1,000 times. They know exactly how to keep us safe." Liam nodded, still scared, but comforted by Keanu's calm voice. "You ever seen a movie where someone's flying through a storm and comes out into the sunlight?" Keanu asked. Liam smiled faintly. "Yeah, like a superhero." "That's right," Keanu said. "And guess what? The sunlight is always there, just behind the clouds." Double quotes. Suddenly, the turbulence began to ease. The bumps turned into soft shakes, and finally, a smooth glide returned. The seatbelt light remained on, but the tension inside the plane slowly began to lift. Passengers let out quiet sighs of relief. One man even whispered. He calmed down the plane, and the people. The mother beside Liam looked at Keanu. "Thank you," she mouthed. He simply nodded. But something else was brewing, not in the sky, but in the system. The officer who had wrongly confronted Keanu before takeoff. He wasn't finished yet. While the plane was in the air, he had filed a report. A short, sharp, defensive report, claiming the airline had allowed an unverified individual into the first-class cabin. He left out details, of course, didn't mention the folder, or the title, or the truth. He thought no one would question him, but someone did. Her name was Layla Ahmed. She was head of the airline's legal compliance department, and she also happened to be on the same flight, seated quietly in economy, with a tablet on her lap, reviewing company training procedures. She had seen the officer's message pop up midair through the airline's internal system, and when she read the name KeanuReeves, her eyes narrowed. Layla stood up, walked to the front, and approached the purser. "Can you confirm if a Mr. KeanuReeves is seated in 1A?" she asked. The purser blinked. "Yes, ma'am." "Is everything all right?" "I'm from the legal department," Layla said, showing her ID. "Please let him know I'd like to speak to him privately." Minutes later, Keanu was led to a small, curtained crew area near the galley. Layla stood waiting, holding her tablet. "Mr. Reeves," she said with a respectful nod. "I saw what happened before takeoff, and I read the officer's report." Keanu looked at her kindly. "And it's inaccurate," she said. "And dangerous." Keanu nodded. "I assumed as much." Layla looked down, then met his eyes. "May I ask why you never mentioned your title when he first confronted you?" "Because the truth should matter, even when no one knows your title," Keanu said softly. "What would have happened if I weren't someone with power? What if I were just another quiet passenger?" Layla swallowed hard. "You're right. And this can't happen again." They spoke for 15 minutes, not about revenge, not about lawsuits, but about reform. Keanu shared an idea, new training for officers working with airlines, focused on bias, empathy, and silent dignity. "People shouldn't have to prove they belong," Keanu said. "Not with documents, not with appearances, just with humanity." Layla nodded, moved. "We'll start drafting something immediately." As Keanu returned to his seat, passengers watched him, not with curiosity, but with quiet respect. He didn't notice the teenage boy in row 19 snapping a photo of him from behind, captioning it, "The man who kept calm when the sky shook." Both outside the plane and inside it, somewhere above the clouds, the sun broke through, lighting the top of the clouds in gold. The storm was behind them now. The seatbelt sign turned off, but for many on that flight, something had shifted forever. The email that shook headquarters plane touched down at JFK International just after sunset. The sky outside glowed a soft orange, fading into deep blue. Inside the cabin, passengers gathered their things slowly, many still quietly watching. Keanu Reeves as he helped a woman reach her bag from the overhead bin. Not because she asked, just because he noticed she was struggling. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching her small suitcase. "Of course," Keanu replied with a warm nod. As passengers began filing off the plane, one by one, something strange was happening. Not a celebrity moment, not people rushing for autographs. It was something deeper. Dozens of passengers, quietly, sincerely, saying things like "Thank you for today, you taught me something," or simply, "You're a good man." Keanu gave no speeches. He didn't bask in attention. He just smiled gently and walked off the plane like everyone else. But by the time his feet touched the polished airport floor, his name had already reached the airline's global headquarters. In a quiet boardroom on the 32nd floor of the airline's main office, an alert had come in. It wasn't from social media. It wasn't from press. It was from Layla Ahmed, legal compliance head, and it was marked urgent. The subject line read, "Passenger incident, misconduct, misjudgment, and opportunity for change." The executive leadership team gathered early, most of them still in half-tied ties and crumpled shirts. They read Layla's full report. She detailed the officer's assumptions, Keanu's silence, the legal folder, and the entire sequence of events mid-flight, including how Keanu helped calm passengers during turbulence. But it was the final paragraph that made the room fall into silence. Mr. Reeves, though acting quietly and without anger, may have just revealed the cracks in our system better than any consultant or executive ever could. He did not ask for special treatment. He asked for dignity. We should listen. One executive sighed deeply and said, "We need to talk to him, today." Meanwhile, Keanu had reached baggage claim. He wasn't in a rush. He had no assistant with him. He stood alone near Carousel 7, watching the suitcases go by. His duffel bag was old, patched at the corners with a frayed tag. He picked it up and was about to head out when a voice called behind him, "Mr. Reeves." He turned around. A young woman in a navy blazer stood there, holding a phone and looking a bit nervous. "Yes?" He asked kindly. "My name is Emily. I'm with Airline Guest Services. Our leadership team has requested a short meeting, if you're willing." Keanu raised an eyebrow. "About the flight?" She nodded. "Yes, they said it's important." Keanu considered it. He was tired. He had just flown across the country. But then he nodded. "All right, lead the way." 30 minutes later, he was seated in a quiet room at a nearby airport office, surrounded by 5 executives, including Layla. They offered him water, tea, anything he wanted. He simply asked for a cup of black coffee. The room was silent for a moment. Then the airline CEO, a tall man with silver hair, cleared his throat. "Mr. Reeves," he began, "we owe you an apology, not because you're famous or because of your legal role with us, but because you were treated unfairly, and you responded with more grace than most of us could have managed." Keanu said nothing at first. He just listened. "The officer involved has been removed from all airline operations pending review," the CEO continued. "But more importantly, we want to change the system. With your help." Keanu looked around. "You don't need me to fix this. You already know what needs to be done." Layla leaned forward. "Maybe, but no one has ever shown us the mirror the way you did." Another executive chimed in. "Would you consider leading a new passenger dignity and equality initiative? Full control, full freedom, not just for show, for real change." Keanu took a sip of coffee. "I'll do it," he said softly, "but on one condition." They waited, "that you don't tell anyone about it." He continued, "No press, no headlines. This doesn't become a marketing campaign. If you want to change how people are treated, you start by not making it about image." The room fell into stunned silence again. The CEO stood up and offered his hand. "Deal." Keanu stood too, shook his hand, and said, "Then we begin with training, not for the public, for you, the leaders." And with that, he left the room quiet, unhurried. but having shifted the course of an entire airline. But the day still had one more twist to give. Outside the terminal, as Keanu stepped into the city air, he noticed a group of people standing near the exit. One of them held a sign with his name. Keanu frowned. He hadn't requested a car service. As he walked closer, he saw the driver wasn't just anyone. It was Liam's mother from the flight, and Liam stood beside her, holding a small paper airplane. "We didn't want anything," she said nervously. Liam wanted to give you this." Liam handed the folded paper to Keanu, eyes shining. "Thank you for talking to me," Liam said. "You made the sky not scary." Keanu knelt down, opened the paper. Inside was a child's drawing of a plane flying through lightning into sunshine. Above it were written 6 little words in crayon. "You are the calm in storms, KeanuReeves." Eyes filled with quiet tears, he put the paper in his pocket, looked at Liam, and said, "Thank you. You have no idea how much this means." As they said goodbye and walked away, Keanu stood alone on the sidewalk, holding his old bag. The sky turning dark above the city, and yet, something inside him was lit like that little boy's drawing. The storm had passed, but the mission had just begun. Quiet changes in powerful rooms. A week later, in a high-rise office that overlooked the heart of New York City, a large glass boardroom was filled with silence. Not the kind of silence that came from boredom, but the kind that came from attention, from respect. Keanu Reeves stood at the front, wearing the same kind of simple clothes he had worn on the flight: black jeans, a plain shirt, and a calm expression. In his hand was no flashy presentation, no loud slideshow, no corporate buzzwords. Just a single notebook filled with handwritten notes. Around him sat airline board members, senior staff, and decision makers. Powerful people, people who were used to being listened to. But today, they listened differently. "I'm not here to teach you law," Keanu began softly. "You already have teams for that. I'm here to talk about something that doesn't need a degree: how people feel when you see them, or when you don't." He paused. No one interrupted. "You all saw the report," he continued, "about the officer who assumed I didn't belong in first class. But I wasn't angry because he questioned me. I was sad because his reaction is the same one millions of people face every day, not just on flights. In life." One board member adjusted his tie, looking uncomfortable. Another tapped a pen, then stopped. "What happened to me wasn't unique," Keanu said. "It was just visible. But for most passengers, for people who don't have a title or a known name, no one writes a report. No one hears the story." He flipped open his notebook. "I want to start a new kind of training," he said. "Not just videos on a screen, real conversations, role play, storytelling, shared experiences. I want every person working under your brand, from security officers to crew members, to be reminded of one thing: people are not their appearance. They are not their class of seat. They are not their silence." He paused again, letting the words sink in. "You treat someone with respect not because they earned it, but because they are human." The silence broke not with words, but with quiet nods. Eyes softened. Even the most serious faces changed. Layla, seated near the corner, smiled faintly. She had seen this side of Keanu before. Not the actor, not the legal advisor, the human who refused to stand above others but always lifted others with him. "We'll approve it," said one executive. "Every word of it." Keanu nodded. "Thank you. But it's not about approval, it's about action." Later that day, the internal memo went out. New initiative, dignity first, a human-centered approach to customer interaction, led by Keanu Reeves. No press, no cameras, just real change. Across the airline, reactions were mixed at first. Some staff wondered if it was just another celebrity idea. Others worried it would be more rules to follow. But when the first session happened, everything shifted. Inside a staff training center in Chicago, 24 security officers and flight attendants sat in a circle. No desks, no suits, just chairs and honesty. Keanu walked in quietly, sat down, like everyone else, and said, "Tell me the hardest part of your job." Hands went up. "Passengers yell at us," one woman said. "They think we're the enemy." "I don't like having to make snap judgments," another admitted. but we have so little time. Keanu nodded. So when you saw someone dressed simply in first class, what might your first thought be? Someone answered. He got lucky with an upgrade. Others laughed gently. Keanu smiled too. I understand. But what if that man had a heart condition and needed peace? Or had just buried someone and needed rest? The room grew quiet. We never know, he said. So we give kindness by default, because that's how we change things. He shared the story of Martha from row 27C. How she fainted not just from sugar but grief. How a quiet man in a wrongfully judged seat made her feel safe. People listened. Not because he was famous, but because he was honest. By the end of the session, officers were shaking hands, hugging, wiping tears. I never thought of it that way. One whispered, "This isn't training." Another said, "This is healing." But change wasn't just happening inside training rooms. In the weeks that followed, stories began spreading not from newspapers, but from passengers. A mother tweeted, "Flight attendant noticed my son was nervous and sat with him for a few minutes. Said it was part of their Dignity First program. I cried." An elderly veteran posted. Gate officer smiled, asked if I needed help. Not because I looked weak, but because she said, "We look out for each other now." And in one quiet moment, at an airport lounge in Atlanta, a former officer approached Keanu. "I was the guy who stopped you that day," he said, voice trembling. "I got fired, and I deserved it, but I watched the training online, and I get it now." Keanu looked him in the eyes. "You don't need forgiveness from me," he said gently. "You just need to carry that lesson forward." The man nodded, eyes full of quiet regret and new purpose. Meanwhile, Keanu continued to travel. Not first class, not business, often just coach, seat by the window. He didn't want special treatment. He wanted to see what others saw, to feel what others felt. One day, during a flight delay, he sat on the floor near gate C19 beside a young woman with a guide dog. She looked tired, so he offered her his extra granola bar. "You look like someone famous," she said. "I hear that a lot." He smiled. As they talked, her face lit up. "You're that guy," she whispered. "The one who helped change everything." Keanu shook his head. "I'm just one person. The change came from all of you." Her dog rested its head on Keanu's lap, and in that moment, surrounded by crowded gates, fast food wrappers, and tired travelers, something felt right. Change wasn't about headlines. It was about moments. It was about people. And for Keanu, that was the only kind of legacy that ever mattered. The final boarding call for change of 3 months had passed since the day Keanu Reeves sat quietly in seat 1A and was wrongly confronted by an airport security officer. 3 months since the incident that sparked more than just an apology. It sparked a movement. It didn't begin with noise. It began with quiet strength, with kindness, with dignity. The program Keanu had helped launch, Dignity First, was now active in every major airport where the airline operated. It had already trained over 5,000 staff from frontline security to executive boardrooms. But this wasn't a program that taught people to say the right thing. It taught them to see the right thing, to notice the quiet travelers, the nervous first-time flyers, the elderly man who just needed a moment to breathe, the mother with 3 bags and no help, the student in row 32A who just lost her scholarship but was trying to look brave. Stories were pouring in. A janitor received a handwritten thank you note from a businessman after offering a smile and directions. A young girl with autism was gently helped onto a plane after a staff member recognized her panic. Before it turned into a meltdown. A frequent flyer sent a message. "I didn't get champagne or upgrades. I got respect." And for the first time, that meant more. But for Keanu, the most powerful story came quietly. In the mail, no return address. Just a small envelope with his name written neatly in black ink. Inside was a folded piece of paper and a photograph. The photo showed Martha, the older woman, from seat 27C, smiling in her garden, surrounded by blooming sunflowers. She was holding a framed drawing, the one her son, Samuel, had made years ago before he died. It showed a small airplane flying into the sun. Beneath the photo, in her handwriting, were the words, "You reminded me that good people still walk this world. Thank you for letting me live again." Keanu held the letter for a long time. Then he placed it gently inside the back cover of the worn-out book he had been reading on that flight. The same book he'd nearly lost when the officer had tried to remove him. And still, he asked for no credit, no reward, no spotlight. A few weeks later, the airline quietly invited all senior staff, employees, and special guests to a private event held in one of their largest hangars. There were no flashing lights, no celebrities, no press, just rows of chairs under the wing of a parked jet. Keanu was there, sitting in the front row in his usual clothes, quiet, listening. The CEO stepped onto a simple wooden platform and spoke into a modest microphone. 3 months ago, one man reminded us what our business really is: not flying planes, but serving people. Not by class, not by looks, but by heart. He gestured toward Keanu. He never asked for praise. He never asked for recognition. But today, we ask that he stand with us, because his actions made this possible. Keanu walked slowly to the stage. He didn't speak from a script. He didn't carry any notes. He just stood there for a moment, looking at the hundreds of people seated in silence. "I was once told," he began, "that power is not what you have over people, it's what you give to them." He paused. "The man who tried to remove me from first class didn't take my seat. He gave me a chance to see how easy it is to forget that respect isn't earned, it's owed." The room remained silent. "I don't want statues," Keanu said. "I want habits. I want this kindness to outlive me, to pass from one person to the next, quietly until it becomes normal." He looked down, then back up. "If you do that, if you keep doing that, then we've already won." People rose from their chairs, not with loud applause, but with the kind of standing ovation that happens when people are changed, when they know they've witnessed something important. That night, Keanu walked through the airport alone. No security, no cameras, just him and the sound of suitcase wheels echoing on the polished floor. He stopped briefly near gate 19. An elderly man in a veteran's cap was struggling to zip his bag. Without a word, Keanu bent down and helped him, then gave him a hand to stand up straight. "Thank you," the man whispered. Keanu just nodded. "Safe travels." He continued walking. At the far end of the terminal, a little boy was coloring on the floor with crayons. He looked up, eyes wide. It was Liam, the boy from the flight. His mother was nearby, reading. Liam smiled big. "It's you." Keanu smiled back and crouched beside him. "Still flying?" "Yeah," Liam grinned. "But I'm not scared anymore. 'Cause you told me the sun is always behind the clouds." Keanu tapped the boy's crayon gently. "That's right," Liam pointed to his drawing. It showed a small plane flying toward the sun again, but this time, the plane had something written on its side. "Dignity first." Keanu's eyes filled with warmth. He looked at Liam and said, "You're going to change the world, you know that." Liam shrugged. "Maybe, but only if people are nice." Keanu laughed softly. "That's the best place to start." He waved goodbye and walked toward his gate. Flight 87 to San Francisco. He didn't fly in first class that night. He sat in the very last row, near the window, and when the flight attendant asked if he needed anything, he smiled and said, "Just some water, and keep being kind. That's the best service you can give." The plane took off into the sky. High above the clouds, and the sun, as always, was waiting.